Good morning. Welcome to another Menstrual Monday. I'll wait a couple minutes to see if anybody wants to hop on live. If you've missed our live sessions in the past, I am on Instagram Live up here. I'm on YouTube up here. So feel free to watch on whatever platform you prefer. Those who are in my Her Time of the Month community, I will upload this video for you guys to check out when it is done and I'm finished going live. And for everyone else, this will be still up on my IGTV. So if you wanted to watch my other ones, or you wanted to watch this again, or you catch this kind of halfway through, this will be up on my IGTV. But this is why I'm up here on Instagram. I'm down here on YouTube. So I'm going to kind of switch between. Now, today I'm talking about postpartum periods. And a lot of my patients, or a lot of people I speak with, always talk about, oh, I just got my period back postpartum and it is awful. So I'm going to talk about that today. But before we get started, I want to talk about a couple things. Yesterday on my Instagram, I spoke about my free 7-day healthy hormone breakfast challenge that I will be running on February 15th. So that's next Monday. I had a few people sign up for, actually I had a good number of people sign up through the poll. So if you were on that poll and you hit yes to wanting those healthy hormone breakfast recipes sent to your inbox, I will be contacting you directly with that link. But after this video is done, I'm going to put a link in my bio so you can sign up if you want to receive the free healthy hormone breakfast recipes. Now I'm doing the 7-day challenge. So you will get one breakfast recipe sent to your inbox every single day for 7 days. This is to help you get more inspiration in the kitchen when it comes to breakfast. This is because I feel like a lot of women really neglect breakfast. This is one of the first things that I'm dealing with my patients when we work together, is getting you to eat a breakfast that is wholesome and has fat, fiber, protein, ideally all three. So if you want to join in on that healthy breakfast challenge, either send me a DM so I can add you to the list or send you the link, or just wait till I'm done this video. I'll put the link in my bio. You can sign up yourself. So today we're going to be talking about postpartum periods. So really, let's just get started. So you just had a baby and you're either breastfeeding or you're not. Now, whether or not you get or you have a period usually depends on if you're ovulating. Now, there's a couple things that happen here. There's a hormone called prolactin. Prolactin is the main hormone involved in helping you lactate, in increasing your milk supply, and on all of those sorts of things. So this is what helps you breastfeed. Now, typically, prolactin will inhibit ovulation. This is why a lot of the times you don't get a period when you are breastfeeding. But this is also why some women will get pregnant and not it'll be an accidental pregnancy, because they may think because they don't have a period that they're not ovulating, and the two are not mutually exclusive. So here's the first thing to consider. If you're postpartum, number one is, what were your periods like before you got pregnant? Did you have endometriosis? Did you have painful, heavy, irregular periods? Did you have PMS? Did you have fibroids? What did your period look like before? That's the first thing. And did you have any trouble conceiving? That'll be part of the picture as well. When you're postpartum and you are breastfeeding, whether you are breastfeeding or not, sometimes what happens is that prolactin does not inhibit your ovulation enough. And so this is why women get pregnant, is because prolactin is not like a tried and true, breastfeeding is not tried and true birth control. We know that. And so what happens is women getting their period back after postpartum can be really variable. It depends on if you're breastfeeding, how often you're breastfeeding, and how much your prolactin is actually increasing. So let's just think about that kind of to start. Prolactin is supposed to inhibit your ovulation, but it doesn't always. And this can have to do with if the baby is eating at different times, or if the baby starts weaning. This can change the levels of prolactin you have and cause you to ovulate. Now, you can still get a period and not ovulate. These are known as anovulatory cycles. And so I just want to bring a few stats in here with women postpartum. So one study found that in women postpartum, only 20% will have ovulated by 6 months and 64% ovulate by 12 months. This is why it's so common to not get a period when you're exclusively breastfeeding. And so when you are lactating, it is very less likely that you will be ovulating every month, if at all. Some women will not ovulate. Like I said, only 20% of women will ovulate who are breastfeeding by 6 months, and 64% by 12 months. So that doesn't mean that you won't ovulate, but you probably are less likely. Now, after after you have a baby, women who are not breastfeeding, so not lactating, do not have that prolactin, ovulation can occur as early as 25 days postpartum, but usually occurs between 45 and 94 days postpartum. So on average, after you have a baby, you could maybe not ovulate. Even if you're not breastfeeding, you could get your period back and you could maybe still not be ovulating up to 94 days on average. Now, normally, looking at tracking your cycle, we would determine where your most fertile window is based on cervical mucus, maybe based on temperature. And this kind of looks at the whole picture and decides where our most fertile time is. Now, due to the hormonal changes in that breastfeeding transition, cervical mucus actually isn't a very good predictor of what's going on. And so this is not going to accurately reflect those hormonal variations. And this may be a window of time where accidental pregnancy can happen. Research has actually shown that even temperature measurements may not be accurate in the first cycles after your period returns and have been associated with a low predictive value of ovulation. So this means that, again, we're not easily able to predict ovulation. One study actually looked at breastfeeding women who tracked their cycle using cycle monitoring techniques after their period returned. And they found that there was a higher unintended pregnancy rate than those not those not lactating. So really the point I'm trying to drive home is we can't truly track or really predict ovulation in those first few months postpartum. Now, how does this relate to your period? Well, what happens is one of the reasons why your period might be awful when it comes back is because you are having anovulatory cycles. Like I just mentioned, it is likely that you may not ovulate up to like 3 months after having a baby. Now, that can actually be longer, but I mean, on average, we're not ovulating maybe up to 3 months. Now, let's just kind of run through what this means. And so when we have a period, we start first half of the cycle, we're building up the lining. It's estrogen. Then we have ovulation. Ovulation is the main event, right? We release an egg. Now that egg becomes a corpus luteum. That corpus luteum makes progesterone. For the second half of the cycle, progesterone is our progest hormone or our pregnancy supporting hormone. And so what happens is when we don't have ovulation, we don't have that progesterone for the second half of the cycle. We end up in an imbalance of estrogen and progesterone. Now, this is where we're led to an estrogen dominant type picture. This is where we can have PMS, mood swings, irritability, breast tenderness, acne, spotting. And so pair that with literally just having a baby, and you're in for a little bit of a wild ride postpartum. And so just keeping that in mind that you are probably having anovulatory cycles, at least for the first few months. Now, research has actually shown that tracking your cycle becomes a lot more accurate after 6 months postpartum. So as long as if you're trying to prevent pregnancy or you're trying to track your cycle, as long as you have a backup method of contraception for the first 6 months, after 6 months, you should be back to your normal cycle tracking. Now, if your periods are still awful after 6 months postpartum, it's time to get evaluated. And I would say for a number of other reasons, I think you should be evaluated sooner postpartum. But from a period perspective, this is why I tell you, look at what your periods were like before you got pregnant. Now, if your periods, like I said, were heavy and painful and you had PMS and breast tenderness and irritability and acne, and you may have had trouble getting pregnant in the first place, I think it's worthwhile to check in earlier, maybe 3 months, depending on when or if you're breastfeeding and what that whole situation looks like. But if your periods were normal and regular and like on the ball every single month before you got pregnant, then postpartum, I would say it makes sense to wait it out 6 months. If your periods are still awful after 6 months, then it's likely you are probably back to ovulating. And there is something else going on, or you are not back to ovulating, which at 6 months you should be. So those are kind of the two scenarios. Now, there's a few other scenarios as to why your postpartum periods can be crazy. So number one is anovulatory cycles. And like I said, that is a completely normal thing that happens postpartum, especially if you're breastfeeding or not. I mentioned those statistics at the beginning that you may actually not ovulate for the first few months if you are not breastfeeding. And even if you are breastfeeding, you may ovulate, but it's going to be a lot more sporadic. So that can be a reason why if your periods come back or they don't, you may not be ovulating. And a lot of people say, well, I'm not ovulating, or they think if I'm not ovulating, I'm not going to get a period. Or on the contrary, if I have a period, I must be ovulating. And that is not true. We see women all the time with PCOS or polycystic ovarian syndrome, women I work with every single day that maybe have a 30-day cycle, 28-day cycle, and they are not ovulating. So that's an important thing to understand, is that you can have a period without ovulation. They usually aren't fun periods. And so that can be a reason, again, postpartum, why your periods suck. Another reason can be because you're stressed. So being a new mom, having a new baby, having all of this, like, especially if it's your first baby, this lack of sleep that just kind of smokes you in the face, being stressed and overwhelmed and anxious and mom guilt and all of the things that come with being a new mom. Stress can cause you not to ovulate, and it can also cause your hormones to be imbalanced even if you ovulate. So I'm just going to paint a picture for you. When you are stressed, your body makes a hormone called cortisol. Cortisol is our main stress hormone. And what happens is when we are stressed, our body will prefer to make stress hormone over sex hormone. Because if you think about it, our body is innately designed to run from a bear, to protect our lives, right? And so every time we're stressed, our body assumes we're running from that bear. We're just going for it. We're trying to run for our lives. And so what happens is our body preferentially says, well, if we're running from a bear, we don't need to be reproducing. We need to be focusing on running from that bear. So our blood flow goes away from our reproductive organs, our blood pressure goes up, our heart rate goes up. We are just moving from that bear. And so our body is going to favor making stress hormone over sex hormone. We're going to say, forget it. We don't need progesterone right now. We need cortisol. And so if you are in a state of acute stress, your body is going to inherently make more stress hormone and make less sex hormone. And even if your body is making enough sex hormone, stress hormone actually comes around and makes our receptors less sensitive. So what that means is you could actually have normal progesterone levels, normal estrogen levels, normal thyroid levels. But what happens is that cortisol comes around and it's going to make all of those receptors not as sensitive to your hormones. And what that means is you'd probably need more hormone to have the same effect. And so you could be in a state of what feels like hormone deficiency or thyroid issues, and it's really cortisol. And so that's another thing to keep in mind, is especially as a new mom, this can be part of the picture. And so from a period perspective, if we pull it back to looking at your period, if we're favoring cortisol over progesterone, we're in the same state that we were in anovulatory cycles. When we were not ovulating regularly, we're back in the same state. We're not ovulating. We might be ovulating, but our body's not making enough progesterone. And even if it is, that cortisol is out competing it. And so symptomatically, we're feeling like we're in a state of deficiency. And this can do the same thing that estrogen dominance does. We have PMS, painful periods, breast tenderness, acne, irritability, all of the things that we don't want. And so that can cause that issue. Now, I will say, like I said before, I know I said if your periods were regular, they should be regular by 6 months. And if they're not, you should be evaluated. I think that if your periods, if there was some stuff going on before and you were dealing with a lot of stress and you have other symptoms like fatigue and anxiety and all of those other things, I think it's worthwhile to be evaluated sooner. So that was just kind of statistically, but I do think postpartum being evaluated sooner is really, really important to kind of get to the root cause of what's going on. And this brings me to the last reason why your periods might be an issue postpartum, and that is your thyroid. And so this is why I say I think it's important to be evaluated a little bit sooner than 6 months, because what happens, there's a condition known as postpartum thyroiditis. What happens is basically the hormonal changes in that postpartum period make you more vulnerable to having an autoimmune thyroid issue known as Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Now, what happens is your body looks at your thyroid as a foreign entity. So the first step in that is usually kind of the dumping of all of our thyroid hormones. Now, not all women have symptoms during this dumping phase. And actually, about 50% of women don't actually even have any symptoms during this phase. And this can set you up for problems long term. But the reason why I'm bringing it up is because during this hormone dumping phase, we are actually can have symptoms of an excess thyroid. But if we're in a postpartum phase, if we're early postpartum, we just had a baby, and we have symptoms of excess thyroid, which is heart palpitations, sweating, anxiety, diarrhea, trouble sleeping, lots of sweating, maybe night sweats or hot flashes, her doctor is going to be like, listen, you have postpartum anxiety, and leave it at that. And so it's really, really, really important to understand that if you have postpartum anxiety, if these are part of your symptoms, this is part of your picture postpartum, that you are having that blood work completely done. And when I say completely done, I don't mean TSH, I mean TSH, free T3, free T4, as well as antibodies. Antibodies will give you the information you need as to whether or not you have an autoimmune thyroid issue going on. And so that can be part of the picture. But as much as your thyroid can also cause you anxiety and depression, and this needs to be pieced apart when we're looking at postpartum, because we could have postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression, but it also could be a thyroid issue, and it also could be a little bit of everything. We need to look at what it's doing to our period. So your thyroid is involved in your period. And so if you have a thyroid issue, low or high, hypo or hyper, this can impact your period. This can cause your periods to be irregular. It can cause them to not come at all. It can cause them to be heavy. So making sure that we're evaluating our thyroid as well is really important. And so just to kind of summarize and to recap, a couple of reasons why postpartum periods suck is you're probably not ovulating at first. Now, this can be normal to a degree, but I recommend being looked at about 3 months. So if you've had your period back for 3 months and it is still not changing, I know I said you might not ovulate for 6 months, but I feel it's worthwhile investigating. And this is what I do with my patients. We investigate sooner. Number 2 is estrogen dominance. Now, this can be because you're ovulating or you're not ovulating. You can have a relative excess of estrogen or a relative deficiency of progesterone. So that's worthwhile investigating. Number 3 is your thyroid. So making sure that we're evaluating your thyroid, a full thyroid panel, looking at all of the values to make sure that we are ruling out all of the conditions that could possibly be part of the cause of what's going on. Also, postpartum investigation should also include things like vitamin D, things like iron, also known as ferritin. We're looking at your iron stores, looking at vitamin B12. And if you're having heavy periods, having an iron deficiency can also cause those heavy periods. So not only do your heavy periods deplete all your iron, but it can also cause that. And let's just talk about the fact that you just had a baby. And so if you are postpartum, you just had a baby, it is worthwhile to look at these values anyways, especially iron. So that's it for me for today. If you have any questions, please comment in the video below. If you feel like this could be something that a friend of yours would benefit from, please share, like, comment, share, tag a friend who you think could use this information. And then I'm going to kind of circle back. My Healthy Hormone Breakfast Challenge is starting February 15th. If you want to sign up, it is free. Head to the link in my bio because it will be there. And if you're on YouTube, I will upload this to my YouTube channel as well. Thanks, guys.